the BioHub. Today, we're thrilled to welcome Neha Krishnamohan, a seasoned leader at the intersection of biotech innovation, finance, and corporate strategy. Before joining Artiva, Neha built an impressive career on Wall Street as vice president in Goldman Sachs' healthcare investment banking group, where she advised some of the world's leading biotechs on M&As and IPOs. She later brought that expertise into Kinnate Biopharma, where she served as CFO and EVP of Corporate Development. And now at Artiva, the company is advancing scalable NK cell therapies that are safe and designed to reach a broader patient population than traditional autologous immunotherapies can. So join us today as we'll talk through Neha's journey, the cell therapy space, and navigating operating decisions in a difficult market. So Neha, thanks so much for coming on. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. So look, let's start off with a little bit about your journey then. So you've built your career across investment banking, biotech finance, and corporate development. Can you walk us through your journey and how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. And I'm actually going to take you back to high school and my interest in the sciences. So I've always been interested in physics and chemistry and building. I was that kid that, wanted to fix the sound system at home, but didn't really do well fixing it. But I've always been interested in solving problems and something that is more hands-on. And what was intriguing to me about the intersection of healthcare and innovation was the fact that you can impact patients' lives in a way that is unique in that space. I come from a family of doctors and engineers. I didn't want to go to med school, and so I thought, hey, for my undergrad, what is something that I could study that allowed me to harness that interest? And I chose to study biomedical engineering, which was an incredible experience, right? Of being able to apply different facets of engineering to solve problems in healthcare. Was a unique educational set. And I actually thought that I was going to study that and go to Medtronic and build devices. And then I showed up at an informational session for one of the Wall Street banks, and that's when I really got exposure to investment banking. And when I kind of sat there and listening in on some of the different parts of the investment bank, what really struck me was what I ended up doing at Goldman Sachs, which is sort of the classic investment banking, and applying that to an industry, and that was healthcare. And why that was, I really saw the importance of the intersection of business and healthcare in this instance in driving decision-making to drive, in this case, a therapy or a product to patients. And so I had the tremendous opportunity to join Goldman, as you mentioned in the intro, in the investment banking division. I was there for over a decade. And it was really there that I got that exposure to a lot of different companies, everything from managed care, and that was actually my first client, was a managed care client, to biotech. And I think what's unique about biotech is that you are really getting much closer to the patient, and you can really see that impact versus some of the other, healthcare verticals. And playing that small role in helping a company fund their innovation to get a therapy to patients, or helping them partner their therapy with a larger company to help get there faster, really drove my excitement for the space and advising companies. But what was missing is that operational, needing to build, needing to really solve problems in a more hands-on way. And so in 2021, when the opportunity arose to join Kinnate as their CFO and EVP of Corporate Development, that felt like the right time to leave Goldman to challenge myself more in an operational role. And I will say now I have a lot more appreciation for what it takes to bring a drug through development. I always like to say it's easy to advise, harder to actually do the work. I think in biotech, it has gone through a really volatile and challenging environment over the last couple of years. I'm sure we'll dig into it. But I think what I've realized through the experience is that I enjoy the hands-on nature. I enjoy being part of those operational decision makings, driving those decisions, and then the intensity and energy that comes from doing that as a team. And I've also seen the impact of the experience set that I gained from Goldman, right? Not just the transactional experience, but seeing different companies navigate challenges, or what have they done well? How did they land on the decisions that they did strategically to drive a product or a therapy and advance it? That's all been a unique tool set that's really helped me help companies or help the team navigate through some of the strategic decisions that you face on this side of the table. And so after Kinnate sold to Zoma, I joined Artiva right just when they were gearing up to be public. And that sort of brings me to where I am today.
Very good. And just on Artiva, I guess what was it about the company specifically that attracted you to join? You're obviously leading both finance and corporate development. What made you think that this was the right company for you in your career?
Yeah, I think a lot of the decisions I've made, from a career wise or as I've looked at opportunities, stem from a couple of different things that I've always looked at. First is what is the impact I can have in terms of helping the team and partnering with the team to drive decisions in the company. The second is what can I learn and challenge myself, right? In this case, it was a different modality. It was a different therapeutic area. It was a completely different team as well that I knew that I could have exposure to and learn from. And the third is conviction in the programs and the platform, right? And as we all know, biotech is hard. You need that resilience. You need to work as a team to solve and all these problems. And at the time when Artiva was gearing up to go public and they needed someone to lead the team to help them navigate through that milestone in the company, and importantly, someone who had experience in the public company domain. So I felt like that both my experience from Goldman and my prior operational experience would be valuable to the company, and I could contribute a lot, but that also that I'd learn a lot from this experience and challenge myself in a completely different space. And that brings me to my last point, which I know we're going to dig into more. I hope we dig into more about Artiva and its differentiation and its lead program, AlloNK. But what really struck me was what Artiva is attempting to do with AlloNK is breaking a lot of the barriers that have existed today with some of the cell therapy modalities out there, like auto CAR T, and bringing a therapy that is highly scalable to address a meaningful unmet need in autoimmune disease. And the company at the time, and still does, has data in aggressive NHL patients where AlloNK is driving response rates and durability that's in line with the approved autologous therapies. And that data is really different from what has come before from allogeneic cell therapies. And that gave me conviction in terms of the ability for the therapy to be able to deliver that potency of mechanism in autoimmune disease, because there are a lot of similarities as both are B-cell driven cancers. And so in totality, all those three different factors is really what led me to joining Artiva in April of last year.
Very good. And you mentioned pipeline then. Could you just give us a brief overview of the lead program, what it's designed to do, like where it is in stage of development, and why you think it could have a meaningful impact for patients?
Yeah, absolutely. So Artiva's lead program is AlloNK, and AlloNK is a off-the-shelf, allogeneic, non-genetically modified cryopreserved NK cell therapy. And we utilize that NK cell therapy with monoclonal antibodies for targeting. And that's because there's no CAR involved, because it's non-genetically modified. So the underlying mechanism of action for AlloNK is ADCC enhancement, or antibody-dependent cellular cytotoxicity. So what really happens is the monoclonal binds to the antigen on the B cell. And in our case, in our autoimmune trials, we're looking at CD20 as the antigen. And then the FC portion of the monoclonal binds to the CD16 receptor on the NK cell, and then the NK cell does the killing. And so what that really attempts to do is drive a deeper depletion than what the monoclonal can do on its own. We are currently exploring AlloNK in phase 1 and phase 2 trials in autoimmune indications across a broad range of indications, including RA, which is rheumatoid arthritis, Sjogren's disease, systemic sclerosis, myositis, and then lupus as well. And what really drove us to exploring this in autoimmune disease really comes from that unmet need that we see today in patients suffering from various autoimmune diseases. A lot of these patients are on chronic therapies, right? So they're constantly on some sort of drug, whether that's a concomitant medication like steroid or a targeted therapy. So there remains this need for a therapy that can drive a durable response and in some cases remission. And what was seen with the autologous CAR T data was that a deep B cell depletion, which is the underlying mechanism, can drive durable responses in these patients. And so seeing that emerging data and knowing the scalability, which I'll touch on in a second, that AlloNK can bring to the table, and the outpatient-friendly safety profile of our treatment, we felt like to be able to address that unmet need, the strengths of our therapy really played to moving the therapy into autoimmune disease. And that's what drove us to make that pivot from oncology into autoimmune. And I will want to touch on our manufacturing platform that really, I believe, is broken a lot of the barriers out there for cell therapy. For AlloNK, just to give you a sense of the scalability, we source our drug product from umbilical cord units with a high affinity CD16. And from one of those umbilical cord units, we can produce over 4,000 vials, which look like this. This is the size of the vial of 1 billion cells each. And these are cryopreserved cells. And we can do that from a really modest facility in San Diego. So not a huge facility like you typically can think of from a manufacturing perspective. And in terms of COGS, which has always been a question for cell therapy, to give you a sense, one of those vials we project is less than $1,000 at scale. And we're testing 3 billion cells per dose, 3 billion cells and 12 billion cells from a dosing perspective in autoimmune. So as you think about COGS, that could be 3,000 to 12,000 from a range. That is a lot more like a biologic than what you traditionally think of as cell therapy. And we do think that is an incredible advantage for us as we've moved into autoimmunity. And the last thing I'd say is the patient-friendly nature, right? The outpatient administration and the safety profile. This drug can be administered as an IV. It's thought at bedside. It's a 5 to 10 minute time frame. And we have shown in oncology and through trials that we're running in autoimmunity that we can do that in an outpatient setting without hospitalization involved, which again is unique to AlloNK versus some of the other therapeutic modalities out there that are going after this significant unmet need.
Nice. Yes, good to hear about the progress you guys are making. From your perspective, where do you see like the NK cell therapy space fitting into the broader cell therapy landscape? And what do you think makes the approach different to what I guess some of the other key players are doing in the field as well?
Yeah, and I think, as we know, there's a lot of different modalities, right, that are going after this signal of deep B cell depletion, and companies are exploring different indications as well, as they've thought about their programs and where they want to take them through development. As we think about the two things that you usually think about when in drug development, you want to be able to make sure that your therapy is positioned the right way, both from a safety and safety and tolerability perspective, but also certainly delivering efficacy and activity. And we think that AlloNK, being an NK cell therapy and with the scalability that we have the potential to drive that deep B cell depletion mechanism in a community setting, where a lot of the T cell based therapies like auto CAR T, allo CAR T, or the more important T cell TCEs might have challenges in terms of avoiding that hospitalization requirement that comes with some of the safety, tolerability, on target mechanistic impacts, such as escalating CRS. And so again, as we think about sort of that matrix of where we could fit in, we think that we could be the therapy of choice in the community to drive that deep B cell depletion, because as an NK cell therapy, we don't have that same tolerability challenges. like escalating CRS. And we've shown that from our safety data so far in oncology. And we plan to show that as well in autoimmunity as we move the program forward. And we've also currently are running a autoimmune trial in a community rheumatology practice. And that is part of our strategy where there's no oncology involved for a treatment that does include a conditioning regimen, but they're able to give it as an outpatient and not have that same level of monitoring that is required for a lot of the T-cell based therapies out there. And then, the last piece of differentiation that I think that we could bring to bear in terms of positioning is what indications can we go after? And we believe that we need to play to our strengths. And what the profile of the drug allows us to do is that we can potentially go after indications where patients are not willing to be hospitalized or are being treated predominantly in that community setting. And examples of those are rheumatoid arthritis and Sjogren's, which, as I mentioned, are two indications we're exploring in our basket trial. So there's basically two different ways we think that we could differentiate ourselves and position ourselves amongst the other different therapies and modalities out there that are chasing after the deep B-cell depletion signal.
Nice. And who are the key players that you guys are doing a similar sort of thing to you guys? Who are like the key players in that field alongside, obviously, you guys?
Yeah, so I would actually bucket them into modalities because I think each of them offer a place in that grid as I think about therapies to deliver, that the impact on patients. So there are auto CAR T players. So these are like Cabaletta and Kyverna, for example, that are ahead of us, and they started earlier than us in driving therapies in autoimmune disease. And they have each chosen indications that are different as leading indications as we've seen them move forward in development. But I would say we think of them less as what we would be competing with in the community. We actually think about ourselves more like therapies like monoclonals, right? Or biologics that might be delivered in that community setting. And so what could that look like? An example of that is T-cell engagers, so ones that maybe are less potent and are given chronically, that could be given in a community setting, or monoclonal antibodies, where again, we're seeking to deliver something that's got a lot more efficacy than a monoclonal antibody. But monoclonal antibodies like rituximab, which is what we're using in our trials, are used today in an outpatient setting, right? So as I think about the different players, there's auto CAR T, there's T-cell engagers, there's of course other NK cell therapy players out there as well that we will continue to show our differentiation with that are looking at the space in totality.
Nice. And just moving on to, I guess, just the biotech market at the moment, it's obviously super challenging in terms of the capital markets, lack of IPOs, lack of private funding, layoffs, etc. How are you guys and the team navigating the operating decisions, like balancing financial runway with advancing your programs? How are you guys finding those decisions at the moment?
Yeah, I think what's great about Artiva is it's been part of the DNA of the company even before I arrived to really be thinking about, are we investing our capital in programs or in areas where we're going to drive maximum shareholder value? And so that idea of prioritization has always been part of the company's thinking in terms of where we're going. An example of that, for example, is moving from NHL into autoimmune disease, right? Even though we had really strong data in NHL, we chose to pivot because we believed that the therapy had a better chance of success in autoimmune disease, having that time advantage of being one of the first NK cell therapies to be explored in autoimmune disease. And so that's always been part of the DNA. And we've also chosen to focus on allo-NK and not work on a lot of different pipeline programs. We believe allo-NK is a platform and a product, right? We have the ability to take that and this product into multiple indications or combine with different monoclonal antibodies. And then the second thing I would mention is our manufacturing platform, right? And what I said to you earlier was it was a highly scalable platform, small footprint, that's allowed us to keep our cash burn much lower than some of our peers in cell therapy land. and have fewer and lower CapEx investments over time. So that has been an advantage as we have been managing through our cash preservation or capital efficiency. And then we were lucky enough to have an upsized IPO last year of 179 million, and we chose at the time to prioritize long-term, you know, long-term aspects of the company versus the price that we took that capital in. And we are really grateful that we did that because it's allowed us to have runway into Q2 of 2027, which is past sort of the milestones that we're planning to deliver around AlloNK. So I'd say all of those combined has allowed us to kind of be in the position we are in today, which we're very grateful for.
Nice. How are you anticipating the market? Do you think there's going to be much change over the next year or two? Do you think we're in a similar sort of rut for the next year or so? How do you see it from your side? I can give you it from a recruiter side as well, but how are things? How do you see it on your side?
Yeah, I would say, I think if I just compare where we are today versus June of this year, just to use a data point, do feel like we are seeing a lot more stability now than we did earlier this year in terms of the market. So I remain optimistic that next year is going to be a lot better of a year than this year. And, my reason for saying that isn't just a feeling, it's sort of seeing also the more strategic activity with M&A happening, which, as we know, is critically important for biotech in terms of cycling capital back to companies that need funding. And then you're starting to see some signs of companies being able to reach that in IPO market, although that I would say is a little nascent. And then the third is you're seeing companies that are already public when they have data that they're delivering, being able to raise capital around, which is something that you weren't seeing earlier this year, and that was still posing challenging. And so based on all those three factors, I feel like we're perhaps turning the corner a little bit, but it remains to be seen. As we know, biotech volatility is part of the game. And I think, for us at Artiva, we need to be focused on execution and being resilient and delivering what we need to over the next 12, 18, 24 months. And 2026 is going to be an important year for us as we think about the milestones that we're looking to deliver for our program.
Nice. Yeah, I think from someone sees the market on the other side of the fence in terms of number of companies hiring, number of roles available. I think Q1 and Q2 was obviously difficult. There's still a lot of layoffs. Unfortunately, still get a lot of messages from people who've been laid off, but I think there's definitely optimism going into 2026. There's a lot of companies hiring. There's a lot of plans already speaking about that. There's a lot of companies that are hoping to get financed in the next few months, although you never know with that. But I think from someone that sees it on the other side, it seems things are slowly picking up, which I must emphasize. But yeah, slowly but surely.
Fingers crossed. Yeah, fingers crossed.
Yeah, good. And what are you most looking forward to in terms of key milestones and what's next for Artiva? What have you guys got that you guys are next looking forward to?
Yeah, so we have said our public guidance has been that we'll provide our safety and translational data across multiple autoimmune diseases by year end, and that we'd also share by year end the lead indication for AlloNK that we plan to prioritize to take into further development. And in the first half of next year, we plan to share clinical response data in that lead indication that again will help drive the program forward in development. So again, as I mentioned, it's going to be an exciting year in 2026 for us at Artiva. And in our last earnings release, we did share an enrollment update that we've treated over a dozen patients in autoimmune disease, and that's been an exciting milestone for the company with the team we have in place.
Nice. And this is a question we'd always finish with on the BioHub. I know I wanted to give you a bit of a heads up.
Thanks for doing that. I appreciated it.
Yeah. But if you were to have dinner with any three people, past or present, who would it be and why? It doesn't necessarily need to be innovators, although it can be if you like. But yeah, three people you'd like to have dinner with.
Yeah. So the first person I'd like to have dinner with, by the way, I would love to have dinner with all three at the same time at a table because you'll see why. It'll be a really interesting conversation. So Simone Biles, I think we can all say she's shown resilience, discipline, and also vulnerability in a very public setting. And I think those are all qualities of a leader that sometimes are hard to master and navigate through. So importantly, I'd want to understand how she navigated through those. But second is, how does she vault that high? I mean, everyone, I really want to know, like, what does she do to train that can get her to do that? It's really impressive. So she's definitely someone I'd want to have dinner with. The second person is Indra Nui. There are not too many South Asian women that have risen to her level, and her book My Life in Full really resonated with me. There's a lot of experiences that she had growing up, both from a cultural perspective, but also how she navigated her professional career that I think I could learn a lot from in having a dinner conversation. And the third is Yvon Chouinard, who's the founder of Patagonia. Um, there is some controversy around, how he gave his company away. But I think that's, he's a trailblazer that had a very different ethos and how he ran his company. And I'd love to pick his brain and kind of see how one thinks about that. And that's why I said I think all three of them at a dinner table would be really interesting conversation. But that's what I've got.
Nice. Good. Well, look, three terrific answers there. And yeah, thank you for coming on and helping us out with this. I think you've given a really good overview of Artiva, a company I'm certainly going to be following for sure. It sounds exciting what you guys are doing. And yeah, thanks again for helping us out. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on.
Thank you for having me.